7 reasons is why the Raiders have, well, let's face it, sucked over the past 22 years. And I'm going to tell you the 7 things that the Raiders have done over this past year to address each and every one of these 7 issues that have been plaguing the Raiders to make us a losing team and, well, a laughing stock for the most part of the NFL. And why the Raiders aren't going to be a laughing stock anymore. In fact, why they're going to be a little bit dominant and maybe even be building a dynasty. All that and more on today's episode of the Raider D Podcast. All right, Raiders and Raiderettes, before we dive into this, I just want to thank everybody for being here to the Raider D Podcast, sponsored by BlackRainOfficial.com. That is BlackRainOfficial.com. Go get your shirts and your posters today, and also make sure that you're signing up for the newsletter, as there's lots of exciting things that are going to be coming down the pipeline, and you're not going to want to miss out on it. So that is BlackRainOfficial.com. Over a year ago, I turned 45, and I was feeling down. I was feeling out. My libido was down. I could feel my energy was down. I was overstressed. I was overworked. I was overweight. And my wife hipped me to an Asian supplement that they've been using over in Malaysia, Indonesia, China for a very long time. And I started taking it, and I immediately started feeling better. My workouts were getting better. I had more energy, and I just didn't feel quite as stressed. Why? Because it has been clinically proven that Tonga Ali mixed with Fedosia agrestis, which is a root out of North Africa, that combination is clinically proven to help naturally raise your testosterone without all of the negative side effects of TRT, which is testosterone replacement therapy. I've been taking it for a year, long before we ever took a sponsor. So once we started opening up the door to sponsorships to this channel, it was a no-brainer and a perfect fit that Earth Elixir became a sponsor of the channel, because all of their products over there are natural. They are all third-party tested for quality control and clinically proven to help improve your testosterone. But hey, this isn't the only supplement they have over there. They have a whole variety of supplements. So go and check them out today. The link's going to save you 15% on your very first purchase. Thank you again to Earth Elixir for being such a proud supporter of the Raider D Podcast. Now, with that being said, let's jump in today's video and why these 7 things have been the main causes for the Raiders' downfall over the past 22 years. Number 1 has been, and we all know this, the defense has stank for the most part for the past 22 years. In fact, even when we went to the Super Bowl against Tampa Bay, we had a middle of the pack defense and a number 1 offense. Tampa Bay had the number 1 defense, and we all know how that turned out. Yes, that game was a bit rigged, and it was a bit funny, and there's a lot of things that happened there, just like with the tuck rule and the whole Patriots issue. We know the NFL is against us. That's just a fact of life, but you still got to go out there and play ball, and we just didn't play our best. Since that game, the Raiders have simply not been able to muster a top 10 defense. And this has held us back, because if you can't stop teams from scoring points on you, it makes it really difficult for you to win. But here's what the Raiders have done. We all know last year under McDaniels, the defense was terrible. And that's because he had shackles all over Patrick Graham's defense, not letting him run it the way that Patrick Graham wanted to run it. As soon as McDaniels got fired and a defensive former Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champion Antonio Pierce took over as the head coach, he immediately took the shackles off of Patrick Graham, and that defense started to flourish. In fact, that defense finished 15th overall last year, despite the first half of being terrible. That's how good we got in the second half of the season, and we finished 9th in points allowed. This is a key metric. You want to have a defense that's in the top 10 of this metric, because that means that if you can keep teams from scoring points, it gives your offense the ability to win games. And that is exactly what started to happen. Now, going into the offseason, we're only going to get better because we've added some really key pieces. We did really well in the draft with Dekamarion Richardson, Eichenberg, Trey Taylor, Devon Shire, and more. And this is going to add a lot of depth and a lot of competition to that secondary and linebacker core, which is essential, something that the Raiders really needed to have. When it comes to the free agency, we already know that we got a top 3 defensive tackle. In fact, on my board of free agent defensive tackles that the Raiders needed to look at 3.5 months ago, I had him listed at number 3. And admittedly, I think I was wrong having him down at 3. I think he should have been number 1. And there's a very key factor of why I think he should be number 1. He may have not had as many sacks as Justin Madubuike, but what he does have is production. Let's take a look at Max Crosby. Max Crosby played 1,081 snaps, which equated to 95.41% of the snaps played. He was on the field. When your best player out there is on the field the vast majority of snaps, it spells success for your team. Now, you go and you get a guy like Christian Wilkins, who is a defensive tackle. He's a 300-pound man. He's a big boy. These guys typically only play 25% of the snaps, but Christian Wilkins plays 80.9% of the snaps. This is unheard of for a defensive tackle to have the type of conditioning that Christian Wilkins has. When you're a dominant player at defensive tackle position and you're out there over 80% of the snaps lined up to a dominant defensive end who's out there over 95% of the snaps, you're going to have a dominant defensive line. Both of these guys have had relatively healthy careers and their motors are unquestionable. Add into the fact that this is going to be Malcolm Koonce's second year of breakout. Malcolm Koonce is reaching his peak. He hit 8 sacks last year in the second half of the season when the chains were taken off of him and he was able to go and feast and eat. And now you only expect that he's going to continue that on this year. In fact, Patrick Graham had glowing praise of him that he is now schooling the younger defensive linemen, taking that leadership role. Once you take that leadership role, that means that you have mastered your craft, as Patrick Graham has mentioned about Malcolm Koonce and why he's giddy that Malcolm is taking that next step.
For Malcolm, I just saw him coaching up one of the younger players. It's like this, do that. Once you see that, that's showing command of his craft. I mean, I was just proud. I was giddy.
Now, you also have our defensive end pass rusher that played a lot of defensive tackle last year to learn how to use his hands better as well as utilize that strength. And he was a number 7 overall pick last year. Second year with defensive linemen is when you typically see them start to shine, which is why Tyree Wilson will take that next step, in my opinion, this year, and he is going to get over 10 sacks. That means you have Max Crosby probably winning Defensive Player of the Year. I think he's going to hit somewhere between 18 to 20 sacks because offensive lines and tight ends can no longer focus solely on Max Crosby. They have to take a look at Christian Wilkins, and then you're going to have Malcolm Koonce and Tyree Wilson, the two-headed monster on the other side, coming off the edge, coming off the middle, and taking names as they take people down. Also, we were able to re-sign our depth pieces that played really well for us in Butler and Jenkins. And we have a bunch of young guys who are also going to be those depth pieces. This gives us a dominant defensive line, and that is why the Raiders are going to have a great defensive this year. Add into the pieces that we had last year. Jack Jones is going to be able to feast because quarterbacks are going to be under pressure. They're going to throw errant balls, and Jack Jones is a ball hawk. He's going to go up there and snatch those out of the air. Now, Jacorian Bennett needs to take that next step. He was a rookie last year. He's going to be opposite. He's probably going to be the starter. And we also have DeCamarion Richardson, who is long and fast. He has a lot to learn, as Patrick Graham said, but see him start to get some snaps this year as well. I expect that Jacorian Bennett will be the starter opposite of Jack Jones. And then Trey Taylor is also going to be a great guy who is going to come in. He was out of Air Force. He was voted the best DB in all of college last year, and he fell all the way to the 7th round where we were able to pick him up for almost nothing. That's crazy. This dude is a baller. He is a hitter. He is a sniper out there. It is going to be a fantastic thing. Expect to see him as a full-time starter and possible Pro Bowler within the next 2 years. That means that we have solidified the defense. I believe the Raiders will have a top 5 overall defense this year, and we will probably have the number 1 defensive line. Moving on to the next issue that the Raiders have had. This has plagued the Raiders for a very long time. We have always been one of the most penalized teams in the NFL. This kills drives and it kills momentum. In 2022, the Raiders were ranked 31st in the NFL. Horrible. There was only one team in the entire NFL that was worse than us, but we cleaned that up in 2023. In 2023, we were ranked 17th, middle of the pack, so we still got some work to do, but we dropped from 113 penalties all the way down to 75. That is significant improvement. What that's showing is the defense is playing disciplined ball, and that offensive line is also not getting all the false starts and the holding calls that we typically always get year after year after year, which costs us games. Expect to see that the Raiders are going to improve on this stat even more this year for one reason. We're going to be playing that West Coast offense, which means offensive linemen are not going to have to hold their blocks for as long because you're going to see a lot of screens, a lot of bubbles, a lot of slant routes, a lot of 12-man personnel, 11-man personnel, 21-man personnel. You're going to see the ball getting out of the quarterback's hand a lot faster. And that means a lot less penalties on that offensive line. And it's year 2 of the Raiders really engaging in Patrick Graham's defense, and that is going to only re-solidify. I know it's not technically year 2, but really since the shackles have been taken off of him and he's able to really run that defense the way that it needs to be, that means that they're going to be more disciplined. There's going to be less pass interference calls. There's going to be less roughing the passer call. All of that should go down. Expect to see the Raiders in the top 10 in this category, which will help the Raiders to maintain drives and win games. Let's talk about general managers. This has been a big problem with the Raiders. We have had a plethora of general managers since Al Davis's passing, and none of them were really true general managers. They all, from McKenzie to Mike Mayock to Dave Ziegler, they were essentially guys to come in and just be like an executive assistant to the real GM. The real GM was John Gruden. The real GM was Josh McDaniels. They were making all the calls. They were calling all the shots, and this simply does not work. Look, the NFL is way more complicated than it used to be. Contracts take teams of lawyers just to be able to maintain them, and you need a team of accountants just to make sure everything is going accordingly. This is right out of the mouth of Tom Telesco. It is not like it used to be back in the 70s and 80s where an owner could be the GM. Now you need an entire team of very smart people to do this, and that is what the Raiders have always had a problem with. You had an egotistical coach who wanted to run everything, and then you had a guy like Mayock just doing whatever the coach wanted, or you had a guy like Ziegler just doing whatever the coach wanted, and this spelled for disaster. Now, they did have good draft picks. They did have some good free agency signings. I'm not saying that they didn't, but what you need to do is have a coach that is relying on coaching and focusing on coaching, and you need to have a GM that is focused on being a GM. You have to have that compartmentalization, and that is what the Raiders now have with Tom Telesco and Coach Antonio Pierce. Coach Antonio Pierce just wants to be a coach. Tom Telesco just wants to be a GM. Let those two geniuses do what they do, and that should spell success, as well as give a lot of continuity to the team year after year after year. This is what the Raiders have not had. We've had way too many flash in the pans, too many band-aids from coaches to GMs to players. We need to get stability in the team. That's how you build a dynasty. And I think that is what the Raiders are about to do. Speaking of that, we've had a carousel rotation of offensive guru coaches that just haven't worked out. I'm talking from John Gruden to Bill Callahan, Norv Turner, Lane Kiffin, back to John Gruden to Josh McDaniels. Admittedly, we were trending in the right direction with John Gruden in 2019 when the NFL came in to tank us, but that's neither here nor there. He is now gone, and we finally have a coach who just wants to be a coach. And the best thing about Antonio Pierce is, despite the fact that he's a Super Bowl champion, a Pro Bowler, a leader of his team over there at the New York Giants when he played, he also is humble enough to know what he doesn't know and go out and get the right guys to come in and help this team win. He's great at understanding talent. Think Jack Jones. When he was released by the Patriots, Jack Jones went to Champ Kelly and Mark Davis and said, we got to pick this guy up. And they said, nah, he's risky. We don't want to do it. He went back down, looked at some more footage, looked at some more stuff, made some calls, made some conversations, and said, no, I'm right about this. This kid is going to be good for the Raiders. Went back upstairs and said, guys, we got to get him. Made the case for him. They trusted coach. They brought Jack Jones in, 2 pick sixes and a dominant defensive corner, and the rest is history. This is what he is. He is a great evaluator of talent, a great motivator of that talent, and now he's humble enough to know I got to rely on my offensive coordinator and I got to rely on my defensive coordinator to do all the X's and O's, and I'm just going to be the captain of the ship. That's what a head coach should be. That's what Antonio Pierce is. That is John Madden 2.0. That's what we got in Antonio Pierce, and I think it's going to be a fantastic success. Another issue that the Raiders have had is the tight end position. Now, if you want to win in the NFL, you have to have a dominant receiving tight end. Think George Kittle, think Travis Kelce, think Gronkowski. All of these teams that have had success, from the 49ers, the Patriots, to the Chiefs, have had a dominant tight end who can also be a great receiver. He actually acts as a huge receiver for the quarterback. A dominant receiving tight end is the best friend to any quarterback at any level of football, because it's a lot easier to throw the ball over the middle to a giant dude who can just outmuscle and outjump and outrun everybody in the middle of the field. It makes it a lot easier than trying to throw a 30-yard bomb down a sideline. That's a much more difficult pass. So having a great tight end is a great friend for any quarterback. Think Darren Waller before all of his hamstring injuries. Darren Waller was the most dominant wide receiving tight end. He was essentially an oversized wide receiver for Derek Carr, and he made Derek Carr look really well. We went out and we drafted Michael Mayer. Michael Mayer's nickname is Baby Gronk, and he is. He's not quite as athletic as Gronkowski. And I don't know if he'll have the career that Gronkowski had, but he was a phenomenal draft pick, and he's going to continue to be a phenomenal player for the Raiders. But at pick 13, when unbehold to the entire world, Brock Bowers, the best tight end in all of college football, a guy who is probably the best athlete in the entire SEC, fell to the Raiders at 13. It was a no-brainer. They did not hesitate. They made the call, and Brock Bowers is coming to the Raiders. And Brock Bowers came to the Raiders. Now you have 2 fantastic receiving options at the tight end position, which allows you to run the 12-man personnel, which gives defenses fits. And this is a key for success for the Raiders. We have Devontae Adams, we have Jacoby Myers, we have Trey Tucker, and we have some gems in the free agency that we've picked up, as well as undrafted free agents that are going to make our wide receiver core even better. Add into that 2 dominant receiving tight ends, and the Raiders offense should be firing on all cylinders, especially in the red zone, which has been a major problem. And you fix that by bringing in guys like Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer to run that 12-man personnel, and it just creates mismatches all over that defense, and you should be able to score a lot more points. So that has me excited. But you have to have a quarterback who can throw the ball to these guys. And outside of Derek Carr for 9 years with the Raiders, we didn't have a solid starter at the quarterback position since Rich Gannon. It's a tough job. How do you get a dominant quarterback, a guy who is a superstar, a playmaker? There are only so many of them. So many come out of the draft, and there are always so many in the free agency, but there are only a few who can be elite. If you go back and you look at Aiden O'Connell, who nobody thought would be a superstar until preseason, everybody's seen, oh, this dude might have something. If you compare his stats to guys like Peyton Manning, he has better rookie stats than Peyton Manning did. If you look at Josh Allen, a superstar in the NFL right now with the Buffalo Bills, he has better stats than Josh Allen's rookie year, which means you don't know what you don't know. And we don't know. Is Aiden O'Connell going to be a superstar? Is he going to take that next step and be the Peyton Manning 2.0, the Tom Brady 2.0? Not going to be a Josh Allen, not going to be a Patrick Mahomes, certainly not going to be a Lamar Jackson, but as a more stationary quarterback who can get out and scramble just a little bit, long enough to get somebody open or throw them open, Aiden O'Connell has that ability. He can make every throw out there on the field. Nobody doubts that. And he's a big guy and he has a strong arm. Aiden O'Connell is also one of the smartest quarterbacks in the NFL. He absorbs playbooks. He absorbed Josh McDaniels' super complicated playbook as a third stringer and then was thrown in to the fire and told to go and run it. And then after Josh McDaniels got fired, it was still the same playbook, still complicated. And Aiden O'Connell was able to handle it effectively. Was he a superstar last year? No. But was he serviceable? Absolutely. And that's why I think Aiden O'Connell may still be a question mark, but they went and got Minshew as a insurance policy, wanting to make sure that if Aiden O'Connell is not the guy, you have somebody that can step in and take over. And Gardner Minshew is that kind of guy. This is the problem that the Raiders have had. With Derek Carr, we never had that guy. He never was in jeopardy of losing his job, and therefore maybe he became a bit complacent. Whereas Aiden O'Connell, his job is not guaranteed. Gardner Minshew can take it like that. And so he has to go harder, and that's exactly what he's done all offseason. That gives us hope that if he can just be a serviceable quarterback, we can make the playoffs. But if Aiden O'Connell takes the next step, like Peyton Manning did, like Josh Allen did, in their second years, we got a superstar on our hands, and boy, do we got a dynasty in the making. But that leads us to the last problem on this list. And this is the most irritating problem of all, and that is the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and the whole crew. They have been a thorn in the side of the Raiders for a very long time. The Raiders' record against them is not good. They have us 73 wins to our 55 wins and 2 ties. In fact, since 2017, we've only beaten them 3 times. October 19, 2017, under Derek Carr, we beat them 31-30 in a nail-biter at the very end of the game. And then again in October 11th of 2020, we beat them 40-32. Again, a nail-biter, a shootout, which was absolutely crazy. And then last year on Christmas, we gave them the defensive defeat of their lives and beat them 20-14. When it comes to the Chiefs, we have to score points. We have to score a lot. And our defense has to be on point. Because as much as we may hate the Chiefs, we do have to give them credit that they are good at what they do. And until we can take the king of the hill off of the hill, we will never be the king on the hill. I think the Raiders have done exactly that. And this is why. 1, we went out and got Christian Wilkins to create that interior pressure. This is going to make Patrick Mahomes' life miserable because he already has Max Crosby coming on the edge. He can't step up to avoid Max Crosby anymore because he's going to walk right into Christian Wilkins' hands. And he can't step off to the right because Malcolm Kuntz will be sitting there waiting for him and Tyree Wilson. This is how you got to beat him. So the addition of Christian Wilkins was, I believe, specifically aimed at taking on Patrick Mahomes. Otherwise, he steps into the pocket and out of the pocket and creates his magician type moves that he does. He's not going to be able to do that with Christian in the game. Number 2, we took a play right out of their playbook by drafting Brock Bowers, our very own Travis Kelce, a guy who creates absolute mismatches against linebackers and safeties. Nobody is going to be able to defend this guy, just like nobody's able to fully defend a guy like Travis Kelce. This is going to allow us to score more points. Now, I don't know. Are the Raiders going to be able to dominate the Chiefs like we dominate the Broncos? Probably not. If we can at least go 50-50 with them every season, we have a shot at winning the AFC West and having a good playoff position in the playoffs. That's all we need to do, because we're going to dominate the Broncos and we're going to dominate the Chargers. Both are in teardown and rebuild modes. They're not going to be good probably for a couple more years. So we should be able to at least make the playoffs and hopefully split games with the Chiefs and win the AFC West. Whatever happens, I'm excited for the first time in a long time, because all of these 7 problems have plagued the Raiders for the past 22 years, and all 7 problems have been addressed. Now we just have to go out there and put it on the field.